This is Michele Rigby Assad.
And I'm Shelley Klingerman, and welcome to the Break It Down show.
This is fun. I'm going to be in the main picture here for just a couple of seconds. Mostly is going to be Michele and Shelley talking about getting off the X. How does a female in particular protect themselves? This is all born in a video that we all saw, went viral, of this young lady who was walking through a parking lot and saw someone walking in the parking lot with her. Who knows what happened or didn't happen, but the result was is she's saying, "Stay away." She's screaming and scolding at this perfect stranger. Maybe that person had bad intent, maybe not. Maybe there's some other ways to approach these things so that even if you're asking for an apology, you do extend the apology and say, "Hey, I'm sorry," whatever it is. So I thought I'd bring Michele and Shelley on to kind of talk about that video, thoughts on it, and then in general, just how does one get off the X, Michele, like Michele was talking about, or the stiletto agency approach to if you're a female and traveling, how do you stay safe? So ladies, welcome. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm going to throw Michele up, but we'll bounce back and forth between the two of you. And this is such a treat for me. I love it that you two working in a similar overlapping space are now able to talk here on the Break It Down show.
Yeah, it's so exciting, because you can't talk about security enough, in my opinion. And, having several smart minds talking about it together, I think will be helpful for your listeners. But I think the main idea here is that this video of this woman who said she just had this terrifying encounter in a parking lot, a man that she thought was trying to hurt her, and she had her baby with her. So she was almost hyperventilating in the video. She was all worked up, which obviously happens when there's a lot of adrenaline going. And so the question is, was she in danger? Did she respond appropriately? Could she have done anything better? And of course, none of us really know because we weren't on the ground, but so we're speculating here today.
Yes, so speculating and just going from there, Shelley, what are your thoughts when you watch the video? Again, we don't want to judge. They're calling her parking lot Karen, for crying out loud. Let's be a little bit easier than that. But if you don't have training to know how to deal with these situations, fear and lashing out, that's a legitimate response.
Yeah, I think, again, we weren't there, so we don't know what led up to it. We don't know what her circumstances are. But I definitely think another approach you could have taken was to stay calm, establish your boundaries, hold your boundaries, communicate clearly, listen, because, the other side of that is that he might have been warning her about something that she wasn't aware of. So in these situations, yeah, your adrenaline is racing, your nerves are firing, but staying calm and putting everything into context and evaluating what's going on around you is really in my opinion, the best approach. I think we're losing civility in this country anyway, and I think we need to all do our best to communicate civil, and again, without knowing the whole story, that might have been another option she had.
Michele, how do you know when you're on the X? You and I say get off the X. This is an imminent attack. It's happening right now, right? But what is the X for someone who's shopping at Macy's?
Yeah, so the term get off the X is used in security when you're talking about the place where an attack is launched against you. So the X is literally the site of the attack. And in security, it's always said, we're always trained, you have to do anything you can to get off the X, and that your chances of staying alive and maximizing your security are all about whether you can get safely out of harm's way, right? And so when you're in a parking lot, you're far more vulnerable. You know that this is when you're walking to your car sometimes from your home, from your place of work, from building, from parking lot. I think as women, we should always recognize and understand that this is a vulnerable place. So you need to put your antennas up and start paying attention to what's going on around you. So I think that's maybe the first lesson. So if you find yourself on the X, you're kind of aware and prepared to respond appropriately because you're paying attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to follow up on that, every single training that I do with my audiences, we talk about rule number one is look up and look around. Avoidance is our goal. If you can avoid something from happening, that's going to be always your best way to go. But if you aren't looking up and looking around, you can't identify something that might be, unfolding. So gosh, that's just something we have to break a very unconscious habit of doing. And, if that's even making it a habit to, when you notice that you're on your phone and looking down, to like consciously look up, like even say it. And then, for those of us have kids, that's absolutely something that they are addicted to. So nudging them and just encouraging them to do so. And, I would just did some training earlier today, and it came up like, when is it appropriate to start conditioning your kids to being situationally aware? And in this world we live in, it's really not too early as long as it's age appropriate. But putting context around why it's important, why you're asking them to do that, and then just start to layer those kind of teachable moments, if you will. When you see them doing something, take a moment to say, hey, you need to look up and look around. You have no idea what's going on around you. And when you eliminate that, you eliminate valuable seconds, if you need those, to Michelle's point, get off the X. So look up, look around is, if there's only one thing you ever take away from, the talks that I do, if that's the one thing you take away. And second would be trust your gut.
Oh, yes. Speak
Yeah,
it.
I'm sure you've been in many situations where you needed to trust your gut, and perhaps saved your life in a few situations, maybe.
Oh yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, got to test that out. But I like that, the trust the instinct, because there's our brains work far faster than we are even conscious of. So the brain will know that something is out of place because something looks off. And so you have a whole lifetime of experience, a whole catalog in your brain that you're comparing everything you're seeing against. And so when something is not right, it's different, it will stand out to you, but you may not even know that your brain is doing this, but you feel that, the hair stand up on the back of your neck.
Yeah.
You just might feel like this, I feel very uncomfortable, or that person got my attention for some reason, and you don't have to understand it.
Right.
You don't have to even be able to wrap your head around it. You just have to say, ooh, something doesn't feel right. Get off the X, get to a place of safety, make sure that you're not making yourself more vulnerable by freezing. Okay, you never want to freeze.
Right. Yeah, and I think also I'd like to just, double click on, women tend to be less likely to acknowledge it, because we don't want to appear like we're overreacting, or that we're being, sissies. So sometimes we are really bad about not trusting our gut because we feel like it's making us weaker. So, you can't hear it enough, and especially from people like Michele, who were in the field doing really dangerous work. Trusting your gut is a gift. It's one of our primitive gifts that we've been given as humans, and don't try to make excuses out of it. Just go with it. And if nothing happens, great. If you avoided something from happening, even better. But you have nothing to prove to anybody. Choosing safety should always be your mantra.
Oh yeah.
I want to jump in here and talk a little bit about the video, because there's another cost to this, right? So the lady puts the video up, and this turns into something. It's no longer on her TikTok. It's been pulled down. Her name is published publicly in any newspaper. So her name is Danielle Mitchell. I'm saying that because it's already part of the story, right? But you've taken and put X's all around you potentially because of the reaction to this thing, right? And so I wonder what your guys' thoughts are in terms of thinking, look, a little bit of distance is good. Do you have to go to screaming, do not approach me, and then putting a video about it? How do you not make the situation worse? Because it has to be that the reaction, the negative part of the reaction, was much worse than the actual person in the parking lot that she encountered.
Yeah, I think something we need to consider, as that does gain momentum, is just again, she did what she did in the moment, and if that's what she felt she needed to do, there, it's done. But I think the backlash of that is that, again, we need to watch each other's back, and people are going to be more hesitant because they don't want to get attacked, and they might clearly see something, but because of reactions like that, they might, hesitate to do so. So I think it's great that we're talking about it. Again, no one's faulting her because she did what she felt like she needed to do in that moment. I think probably a lot of the work that Michele and I both do is sometimes women aren't taught to us how to deal with these situations. So, to Michele's point, like, you just react. There's no thought that goes in, or there's no evaluation that goes into it. It's an intentional response, and that intention comes from, training, which builds your confidence, which gives you that ability to think through a situation. And it sounds like it went from 0 to 100, because she wasn't able to circumvent that natural reaction to freeze, fight, flight. And Michele, I'd be curious of your opinion on that.
So
Or
yeah, I have
thoughts.
a couple thoughts. And one is that I don't think we ever want to shame someone for responding in a way that has to do with their safety or the safety of their child. So that's number one. Number two, I think that if she had just come out of this, which appears from the video she had, you can't even fully wrap your head around what made you uncomfortable. You can't articulate the reasons. Maybe an hour or two later, even a couple of days later, she might have said, what really bothered me was X, Y, and Z, which in that moment on that video, she couldn't articulate.
Right.
Okay, so it's very possible there's so much more to the story. And I hate
Right.
that she's, probably felt terrible about being attacked for trying to protect herself. And then on the other side of that, I can't help myself. I'm still a former intel officer. And then I wonder, she could be lying for attention, like, because there are people who make false accusations all the time. They put it on the video and they try to make everybody think they've been through some crazy experience and it never happened. So of course, in my head, I'm like, it could be this, or it could be all the way over here. Who knows?
And another thing too is sometimes we say trust our gut, but we don't test when our gut is wrong. And so if your gut is prone to say, watch out, look out, danger, it doesn't mean that your gut is accurate, right? Like I have a friend, she posted something. She's like, trust your gut. I looked at my car today and the tire was threadbare. And I'm like, why didn't you trust your gut 4 weeks ago before your tire got to this condition, right? So I'm not saying don't trust your gut. And sometimes your gut, something does seem off, right? And Michele, I know you'll recognize this word, like, I don't know what it is, but something is making me adjust my awareness. And so I'm going to, and then you make your plan. It doesn't have to be scream at somebody, but it could be as simple as, I'm going to put 2 cars of space between me and that person over there. I don't know if they're the threat. They might be the thing to corral you into the threat. You just don't know. And so you respond in a way that makes sense. It doesn't have to be a combative negative thing. You really can just create some, I think Clint Emerson and I both would say, create space. And even if you don't go back to your car for 10 minutes, you just go walk around the parking lot or something else, that gives you time to sort out the situation.
Yeah. Can I ask a quick question? Is my internet bad, or it sounds a little bit choppy? Is that coming through? I just want to make sure it's not.
I think you sound good on my end. Maybe it's me that's choppy. Who knows?
Okay. Okay. So, but to comment on what you were just saying, I think your gut. Yes, it could be wrong, which is why it's so important to put everything into context when you have that feeling. So just pause. Start noticing what's going on, what's the full picture of what's going on, and then, oh, I misread. Like, if you can calmly look at the situation, you might be like, within seconds, be like, oh, I misread that, or that's not what I thought it was initially. So again, keeping calm and having that confidence in yourself can sometimes right course what might happen or might not happen.
What is the difference between pause and freeze?
Pausing is you're still active. In my definition, you're pausing, you're just taking it in. Freezing is like you're frozen in thought and body and mind.
Fair enough.
I have a good illustration for what you just said. When many years ago, when I was a student in Cairo, we were told whenever you take taxis, which we took all the time, the taxi driver is going to want to haggle with you. So what you need to do is know how much it costs, get out of the taxi, close the door, hand the right amount of whatever that fare is to the taxi driver through the window and walk away. And so this is what we did, like for the whole semester I was a student in Cairo. And until one time, one of the students, threw the money into the window, started walking away, and the taxi driver's yelling at him like often happens. They're yelling at you, trying to get more money because you're a Western looking person. And my classmate was like, I thought that's what was happening. He was arguing with me. He wanted double or whatever. And so he's like, over his shoulder, he's like trying to run away. And he's like, no, I give you enough money. And he's walking so fast. And now the taxi driver is out of the car and he's going after them. And he's like, what is happening? And finally, when the taxi driver is like, sir, you forgot your camera. So it was one of those moments when he thought he was getting off the X, when he thought he needed to flee, when in fact the man was just trying to help him out.
Right. Exactly.
And so what you're saying is give yourself a second, think through it, don't freeze, and then act.
I think in this case too, that distance proposition of like, let me go like a full row of cars over. And if the person closes distance, even then you might engage them and say, hey, you're making me nervous. Like, and start with that. And if it's me, I'm going to be like, oh gosh, sorry, I was just cutting through. I'll go the other direction. Right. Mm-hmm. And you can handle this thing without being, without jumping right away to something that is abrupt and in their face. Right. You can communicate across this distance. And also create more distance and awareness around you when you say, hey, you're making me nervous. We all get to say these kinds of things.
Yeah. And I think there's also, there's lots of options and nothing is going to be what everybody should do. But, another way you can do that is, I don't want to say with charm, maybe humor, but a friend of mine shared this with me. I'm like, that's brilliant. I've actually used it before. And it's a way to gauge a reaction. And that's by saying, am I going to have a problem with you? And the way you deliver it can kind of be like funny, or it can be like, depending on who it's getting delivered to, they're going to be like, no, or like, look you down. And then, so you can read that. But I thought that was just, it's not my phrase, so I'm stealing it. But yeah, if it's just something that women can use to be like, am I going to have a problem with you? And you can play it kind of either way. So it's just another way you can kind of hold. Yeah, you can have it too. I'll share it.
Yeah, no, I think that's really smart, because women, I think if you have a bevy of options in your head, you can pull out the right one at the right time.
Yeah.
And what you kept saying also was, you said create space, right? So create space between you and someone who might make you feel uncomfortable, which means you can get someone else's attention. You can talk to another person. You can move out of the way. But I think if you're the target of an attack, all you're trying to do is say, I'm not an easy target.
Right.
Because most people who are out to hurt you just are looking for the easy one. And if you put up any kind of a fight or difficulty or make space, or you say, am I going to have a problem with you? You're showing them I'm not an easy victim. And most of the time, that's all you need.
Right. Yeah. Well, I use that analogy as well, Michele. And I use a shark as an analogy as a predator. But sharks are inherently lazy. And so when they go out looking for a meal, they're looking for something that's not going to put up a fight. And, you often hear of them bumping, like if before someone gets bit, if you are interviewing them, they are usually say, yeah, I felt something bump me. Well, sharks will literally bump a potential meal. And if it doesn't swim away or put up a fight, it becomes the meal. If it does, the shark tends to just go on. So to your point, they're fairly lazy. They don't want to fight. They don't want to call attention. So if you just give off that perception that I'm not going to be an easy target victim, oftentimes I use just the term, you can bump them. And, at the end of the day, that's your goal, is not to be the victim that day.
You can also apologize to somebody if you scream at them, get away, don't approach me. And then when you calm down, you're like, hey, sorry. You can always do that, or let it go. What are your thoughts on posting a video to social media in this case? Is this something that needs to be done? Are you informing other women? I don't know. What are your ladies' thoughts?
If it would have been me, I would have waited given myself some time to calm down and the ability to articulate better what I think I just went through, because I think that's more helpful.
Yeah. I think I would have done the same thing. It's just sat on it. Again, we tend to do things when our emotions are high that in the afterthought, we were like, yeah, I maybe shouldn't have made that decision. So I think there's definitely value in sharing stories, and the trainings that I do, I encourage stories to be shared because it's a great opportunity to understand what worked and maybe what didn't. And you can, pivot or fix something. But I think in most situations, when you come off of that kind of a interaction, it's always better to maybe sit on it. And then, Pete, to your point, an apology never goes out of style. So,
Yeah.
You can always apologize and own whatever it is, and it just humanizes you. And most people will be forgiving, and appreciate the fact that, and they'll understand in that moment, that's what you felt your options were, or what you had to do. But apologies are never out of style.
One thing I think that we should also talk about is when you have a moment and you think you're on the X of an attack and you see someone and you determine that that person's it, they may have no idea, no earthly clue that you're even there. We all have this social contract of ignoring one another. Yes, we're going to walk by the same lane in a parking lot or whatever it's going to be. But I don't see you. You don't see me. Especially, I'm a middle-aged dude, right? So I really can just be invisible. And so if you were started screaming at me, I'd be like, "Wait, you're screaming at me?" Like I wouldn't have the first clue that you were screaming at me until I recognized you, and then I'd be like, "Oh," and then you would have my attention, and that could be terrifying to a little person. I'm a pretty big, strong dude, and if all of a sudden you have my full attention, I'd be like, "What?" And my hands would be out. So I guess the approach in an attack might be a soft approach. It could be just an absolute ambush, but also it could be, again, it could be nothing. How do you ladies recommend people deal with that sorting process of, like, is this a long, slow approach towards an attack, or am I putting something in, or does it need to be here? How do you give the other person time to respond? Those are my basic questions.
Well, and I'll just give my thoughts. I think distance is always going to be in your favor. So again, you have to be present. You have to be actively listening as to what's being said, reading body language, putting everything into context that's going on. And that's fluid. So again, that's what's about situational awareness. It's always fluid. It's always going to ebb and flow. You might interpret something or dismiss something that, you have to stay present in that moment and be looking up and looking around and being aware. So I don't know that, again, I have any magic answers as to this situation is this situation is this situation is this, but just constantly evaluating what's going on, reading body language, listening to tone, putting it into kind of perspective of what's going on in that moment.
Yeah, and I think I was approached at a gas station one time. I was the only female I noticed as I pulled into gas stations, because I think of these days, gas stations are another place where we're vulnerable, which is crazy, but here we are. So I got out of my car. I was about to start pumping my gas, putting in my credit card, and he looked like maybe a homeless, a middle-aged homeless man came up to me out of everybody pumping their gas. He came to me and started to speak to me. And, I already felt like vulnerable. I already felt, why are you choosing me? And so I said, you know what? I'm not interested. And this is inappropriate that you're coming to me. I actually said that. It's inappropriate. And I put my finger out, my hand out, or I did something like this. So not only are you speaking your words, but you're showing body language like, go. Not appropriate. You need some help? Go to someone else. Go to one of the men. I actually said that. Approach one of the other men in their cars. Why did you come to me? And he was like, oh, and he jumped back and he's like, I don't. So anyway, it's interesting when you pay attention and you notice that you were the only one approached, and I was the only female around, and you say, no, not appropriate. You need something, you go to, because again, we're women, we want to help. If you need help, go to someone else.
Yeah. And Michelle, I think you make a great point, and it's something again that I talk about is that, have that phrase that you are going to use to keep your boundary protected, but you have to practice it because you just said the very thing that, I try to share too. You have to match your words to your body language, to your tone, to your hand motions. You can't say, you need to back away from me. Like that's not going to land and do what you're meaning it to do. So it sounds simple, but you need to find those words that match something you would say and that you're going to be comfortable saying it. And then put the hand gestures and literally practice it at stoplights. Like, you need to back up and with the tone that it needs to be delivered in. And you need to have one or two of those so that you can come up with them really quick and you get really good at that delivery. The same is with, the physical defense, the self-defense, like pick one or two things that you are going to practice and visualize, can see yourself doing that would work for you. If you're a 5'2" female, maybe a pressure point isn't going to be your best option, maybe a foot stomp, and practice seeing yourself doing that, do the muscle memory, and execute however and whenever you can, because that has to be those second natures. And when someone approaches you, you don't want to be rolling through 10 options of things you could say and then missing your opportunity to establish and hold that boundary. So it sounds easy, and it is easy, but it does take some thought about how you might do that.
That awareness that you talked about, Michelle, to know you were the only visible female that you could see, this is part of like what we're taught how to do. Like Jason Bourne knows like how many people are in a restaurant. You and I both know this. If I choose to know it, I'll know that there are 15 people in this restaurant, and here is the first thing I'm going to throw at somebody if I need to get out of there. But I'm thinking about attack and then run. And by attack, I mean from a distance. I'll throw this chair across the room and go in the opposite direction, right? Like that's how we're trained. When you're a tiny person, you're trying to care for a baby, X's can be anywhere. You don't want to poison your brain and poison your, calm demeanor that could be around you by being terrified of every moment. So how do you balance the awareness with the hypervigilance that turns into later on into, cortisol injecting into your brain all the time and make you crazy?
For me, I have identified places where I am more vulnerable. So there's an understanding, like if I'm in a crowd, I don't like crowds because I know when you're in large crowds, you are vulnerable to pickpocketing or whatever that might be. Parking lots, parking garages. I'm always super vigilant in a parking garage. So, you can't be at that level of attentiveness all the time. So you have to know, okay, here's a place where I need to really pay attention, and then you let it come back down again. So right. You don't want to be paranoid, no, but you just want to be smart when you need to be.
Yeah. And you're always going in and out of those if you apply it like that. If you're in your house, you're probably, what they call in the white. If you go out and you're, walking to your car, you're walking through a parking lot, yeah, maybe you're at a yellow, and then you notice something, maybe you go up to an orange and then like, oh, that's nothing, and then you go back. So, you're always going to be fluctuating in and out of those states of awareness, if you will, which is a good thing. And because that, to your point, if you stay in red, that makes you in that hypervigilant, and then you're not as effective there either. So allowing yourself to just constantly be moving back and forth.
Did you have something to add, Michelle?
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask Shelley, because I love this conversation so much. Women, we tend to apologize. And when I talk to women about security, I hear them say things like, oh, I didn't mean to prejudge that person. And they're like, oh, I don't want to prejudge. I saw this guy walking, and I said, wait a minute, hold on. We need to stop what you just called that. You were reading body language, or you were looking at behavior. But women apologize for it, stuff it down. So I was just wondering, what do you do when you hear women use that kind of language?
I the same thing. We talk about how women are somewhat hardwired to be nice. We don't want to offend. We don't want to humiliate. we don't want to embarrass. So we will allow ourselves to stay in these really uncomfortable situations to spare someone, a complete stranger's feelings. And you can still be polite, but to your point, yeah, you don't have to apologize. And there's truly some things I think that women need to unlearn. And that is one of them. We don't have to be nice all the time. It is okay in some instances to be the B word if that's what you need to do in the moment, if you're not able to disengage. But I'm always a proponent of being, kind and considerate, but
Firm.
bold and confident and firm. Yeah, absolutely. But I couldn't agree with you more. I hear a lot of apologies, and there is no apology needed. And when our kids hear us say that, especially our daughters, we just continue to pass that hardwiredness down, and that's something I think we need to be deliberately breaking. And again, if you misread something, like if someone's following you and you were to turn around and be like, because we'll just walk. I mean, Michele, maybe you've had this situation. You're walking down a street in maybe a bigger city, and someone is behind you and it's making you uncomfortable, and you just want to turn around and look, but you don't want them to think that you don't trust them, and it's a complete stranger. So we will let ourselves have that hair on the back of your neck and on your arms raised, and all you need to do is turn around and be like, oh, again, I'm a big proponent of humor. Like, oh my God, I thought I heard something behind me. Like, just disengage it, I mean, just be lighthearted and be, charming. And you're going to immediately know their response. Because Pete, to your point, if you turn around and you didn't realize you were walking that close and making somebody uncomfortable, you would immediately be like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Men sometimes just don't even, that's not a situation they have to really deal with. It's just not an issue for them, so they just don't even think about it. But when you call it to their attention, they're like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry, I meant nothing of it. But I've also been training mixed crowds, and men will be like, you see the light bulb going off, and they're like, oh my gosh, from now on I'm going to call out ahead, like, hey, I don't want to startle you, just want to let you know I'm coming up behind you. Or we were brainstorming on things they could do, and one guy suggested, like, just I'm going to think about talking loudly on my phone, even if I'm not on it, but just so it doesn't even appear that I'm trying to sneak up. Others said they just, from now I'm just going to cross the road. There's no point in making. So, a lot of it sometimes is just completely, they're just not aware.
Absolutely.
All right, well, let me ask another question on this. So, as we're talking about and as a dude, I agree. If I'm behind someone and I notice that they're starting to notice me through body language, I'll call out and say, "Hey, I'm just walking the same direction," just so they know. And I'm glad to stop. I totally practice if I'm walking through a parking lot and I do detect some kind of potential threat, I will absolutely do a 360 to see what's behind me, because again, that person may be the trigger and they're waiting. And so I do look, and if something looks off, I stop what I'm doing and I change my attitude, because, again, all three of us know, like, that approach phase is very dangerous for them as well as for us. And so you want to be the bumper. You want to be the bumper rather than them bumping you and be like, hey, I'm paying attention. You're going to have to go to somebody else, and you just walk around in a circle or whatever it is, because it is easy to be overwhelmed. But what does ready look like for you two? I mean, we're not going to pull out, a 1911 45 caliber pistol and just start laying waste to people. But what does ready look like beyond creating distance, beyond talking, beyond checking your surroundings? What is, a little bit of a distance creating, even up to a weapon? What does ready look like for the both of you day to day?
For me, it's just having my phone at the ready. So if I'm, again, walking into a garage, a parking structure, I usually have my phone ready. And a couple years ago, I was in Virginia, Northern Virginia, DC area, at a mall, and it was a parking garage, and I was going up the steps. I had my phone right with me, and I literally heard a woman screaming on the landing. And so I was like, what? Like, it sounded like somebody was doing something to her. So I got my phone ready to dial 911. I walked up the steps. I walked towards it because I thought another woman was being harmed. And she was being hit by her partner. husband, boyfriend, partner, whatever. And weirdly, strangely, they were speaking Arabic. And so I yelled at them I yelled at him in Arabic, which shocked him, which was probably enough to like kind of like stop whatever was going on. But the fact was, I was ready to call 911. I was ready to come to someone's aid to at least say, I've got to get some help here. But that was weird. Like, yeah, you never quite know how you're going to react until you're tested, right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, to Michelle's point, and you know, with technology, technology can take you out of a situation, or you can leverage it. So it can be a hindrance or it can be a tool. And, you know, if you're walking down the street with your head down, that's taking you out of the moment. If you're walking up the stairs and you have 911 dialed in, ready to hit send, that's using technology to your advantage. So I agree. Having, you know, there's lots of apps too, like if that gives you that sense of security to have one of those apps pulled up with the button, or you know, whatever that might be, that's one thing. I think too, that distance is always beneficial for options. So if you, again, if you don't want to be hyper vigilant, but if you do start to notice things and you do start to get that sense, that distance, and you know, your breathing is another thing, so you can control your heart rate and you can start evaluating, what are my options here. You said if you see something, you stop, look around, make a decision if I need to go a different direction, if there's, you know, no other threat behind me. So in my opinion too, ready is your boundary, and keeping that, whatever that boundary is for you, and space is always going to be your friend, because that gives you time, and time is what gives you options. So I love the phone. I agree with that. And then I guess, you know, my ready is, and make no mistake, I am not perfect at this too, but trying to not look down and be walking and be out in the open when I'm on my phone looking down, so that I eliminate my ability to have that readiness, because you know, when your head's down, you're not seeing any of that stuff go on, you know. And then you factor in, you know, many are walking around with, I don't understand it, but like the headphones on. So now you've taken away your sense of, you know, these senses that you're given to protect yourself. You're absolutely taking them away from yourself with your eyes by looking at your phone, your ears by putting headphones on. Yeah, you're putting yourself at a unnecessary disadvantage when we do those things.
Sometimes it's tough to create space. Public transit can be terrifying. You know, walking down the street with homeless folks on it, I don't feel comfortable with that. Is anything going to happen? Probably not. However, there's a lot of people that I can't account for their behavior at any given moment. And we all have seen some crazy things from homeless folks. So if you're riding on a bus, or you're on a platform for mass transit, or you're actually on the train, what I don't know. I mean, again, there's a social contract. Don't interact with me. I won't interact with you. We'll all get to our stops. We'll all go our separate way. When that contract starts to be broken, what are your guys' bits of advice for that? I mean, obviously, we're talking about a lot of variables, but in general, what do you think?
I think once again, for women, we're like, oh, don't prejudge. That person on the train is making you feel uncomfortable. Get off the train at the next stop. Wait one, jump back on the next one, or go to another car. Like, don't feel bad to react.
Right. Yeah, and you know, you're probably never going to see that person again. Why are we so concerned about the impression that we're making on these people? So I think women are just put unnecessary factors into the decision sometimes, and we just need to be a little more cut and dry with this stuff, and not put so much thought into it. You know, same thing with an elevator. How many women have had maybe people in the elevator that made them so uncomfortable, and you know, because you had floor 6 pushed, for whatever reason, we are, you know, not going to allow ourselves to get off on 2 when the door opens again, to the point, Michelle, they just wait for the next one. But you would be shocked, Pete, I think, if you were in the room with Michelle and I on some of these trainings, where what seems so easy and natural, we will fight because of, again, this hardwired of, we don't want to, you know, hurt anyone's feelings or make them think that we don't trust them or what have you. So talking about it, and just being reminded that it is okay, hopefully will come to mind in those situations where maybe a female is having a second thought about getting off of a bus or getting out of an elevator. Hopefully they will come back to a
Okay, am I the
training.
only one on here?
No,
Just in case. I'll keep talking.
it's
Oh, I
like
think,
maybe Michelle. Yeah,
did we
So
lose her?
I think so. She'll be back in a second. Wi-Fi, right? Like it's like
Yeah,
the
right.
more we do these things, the crappier Wi-Fi seems to get. I wanted to bring up this point too. Like if you're on a train, your schedule, your stuff, it's all secondary if you feel a threat, right? Like you don't necessarily have to abandon your
Right.
laptop, but if it's time to scoot, it's time to scoot and you have to move out. If you're on a train, my advice has always been like go to the next car, go towards the head of the train. There's likely a train operator in that part of the train. And if you feel threatened and the person follows you, you hopefully interact with someone. Hey, there's a man right there. There's someone following me. If you get up to the main person and you bang on the door, you've got options on to create space on a train. A bus, I think it's great to get off of the bus if you need to. All of these things allow you to create space in these circumstances. And then I don't know about you ladies, but I try to, and this is when I'm at my best. And if I get on a train, I try to pick someone and I smile and I say hi, just to exist in that person's world for a moment.
Yeah.
And maybe I won't ever need that, but I'm just making a brief human connection that may be transactional, maybe go away. But that's what I try to do is if there's something going on. And oftentimes I am the guy that stands up and says, hey, knock it off. And there's almost always one of those people on the train somewhere if you're lucky. And then, you just need that one person you've engaged with to say, hey, we're not going to do this terrible thing today.
I love that. That exerts authority. Whether you
Yes.
realize that's what you're doing or not, it exerts a presence, it exerts authority, and I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't want to do that. That's awesome.
I am awesome today.
You're awesome every day.
Shelley, what are your thoughts on a female engaging someone with a smile on a high or whatever it is, and maybe not looking for an advocate, but just existing to someone else in that train in a very pleasant way, as opposed to a scowl and ignoring everybody?
I absolutely. I think we are so hungry for kindness and just human interaction. I think it's a great idea. And again, I'm always reading the other person, and I think that's what you do. If you smile and they scowl, then that's one reaction. If they smile and you make eye contact and they smile back, to your point, it's a
Mhm.
familiar person. If something goes down, you've got at least a human um, connection, and I don't think that will ever not serve you. So you know, we were just I keep referring to training because I just did it earlier today, and all of the things that we're talking about are honestly things that are coming up in a lot of conversations. The world is a different place. It's these random acts. What used to be the rules are no more. We were talking about, somebody was sharing a story about how they were in a situation where there was someone who was gorked out on drugs, beating on their car window at a train, and she's like, nobody would help. I had to call, she was calling the police, but she was afraid he was going to try to get in her car, and she's like, people saw it and nobody offered to help me. And it's really unfortunate that that is the society that we're living in. And you can understand it in some situations, but in others we just can't accept it. And we have to be, that we got to be leading by example and smiling back and making, when we're trying to make a connection, do it in return. And the civility that we talked about at the beginning of this, if there's an option to do that first. If that fails, then go beast mode. But civility is probably gonna get you the result you want, and can spare a lot of kind of just negative.
I think that since you mentioned that, I think I've done that a lot where I've noticed someone that made me feel uncomfortable, and then I went out of my way to look at them and say, "Hey," as I'm getting on a train or and I actually greet the person that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. And it makes, yeah, I think too, like they know you're there then, right? Like
yeah,
your
and
point, you
you're not
establish a
passive.
presence.
You're
Yeah.
aware, you're not
Yep.
passive, you're not an
Right.
easy target. You're signaling all those things when you do that, and
Right.
then you're being just
Right.
like a decent person too.
Exactly. Decency. Yeah. And then you think about it, what's a criminal not want? They don't want you to be able to identify them, right? So if they know you made eye
Yeah,
contact and acknowledge them, again, that we might not know, but that might be the subtle bump. And they're like, I've been had by that one. Now I got to go move on. And,
yeah,
mission accomplished if that's what happens. But yeah, for all those reasons, yeah, they don't want you to be able to recognize them. So if you are very intentional about making that eye contact, that might be all it takes. And again, there was nothing nasty, there was nothing hateful about it. It was just kind of that noticing.
yeah. And I also want to throw out there, so many women feel uncomfortable with the idea, well, I don't want to profile people, but what you do want to profile is behavior.
Yeah.
And so you're profiling how someone is acting. And what I tell people is you do want to look at the eyes. The eyes are such a big indicator of intent. The intent it can be photographed with the eyes. So it's I know I've talked about this, I think, in the show before. Forgive me for bringing this up again, but the one time I was in a toy store with my niece, and we were walking through the Barbie doll section, and I see this dude crouched down with greasy hair. He was very unkempt. His shirt was like half tucked in, and he caught my eye because what is this dude doing by himself, by next to the hot pink Barbie dolls?
Yeah. Mhm.
Where's his kid? Like, who's with him? And so what I did was, and this is such a good lesson, I kept my eyes on him. So as we were walking by him, I did not look away. I kept on him the entire time. And when he shifted and his eyes went to my 6-year-old niece, or what, I can't remember her exact age, but she was very young, with really terrible eyes, I knew he was a pedophile. But I wouldn't have known that had I not followed him, had I not been looking at his behavior, had I not been keyed into his eyes. Once I saw that, I knew.
Yep. Yep.
So it's, again, profiling behavior.
And to your point, like the eyes will tell. It's those telltale signs. So if somebody's like looking, they're standing next to you and they're looking off and they keep shifting their eyes, that might be intending on the way they're going to go, looking at their feet. And those are really interesting. I think they're kind of fun and interesting, but just to learn those human telltale, because then what you might have looked at someone and completely dismissed a sign or a signal, you know how to read it, and you can just add that into that whole assessment we keep talking about, like what's going on, what are they doing, what is their behavior. Just another data point that might help you make a decision either way.
It's so easy to lock ourselves in our houses. Like I would rather be talking to you ladies face to face if we had our time and chance. We don't, because the convenience of the internet, but it's also the convenience of the internet to have food delivered to your house, to have
Yeah.
anything sent. And so what we don't want to do is create a bunch of people who are terrified the moment they leave the house. How does someone, male or female, how do they create confidence? And this is a bit of a chance for you guys to plug what you do. How do you create the confidence and know that you can transact your actions out in the world without being terrified that you're going to be attacked? Because the God's honest truth is out of the 8.03 billion of us, most of us every single day will not be attacked. The vast billions and billions and billions, it's not even a billion people that'll get attacked. So most of us will walk through our day and be fine. So how do you build confidence that you have the competence to deal with these situations and push away a threat if it happens to approach you?
I would say preparation and training, training again to know all the things that we've been talking about. And that training comes from being intentional in preparation. So I think all that leads to confidence, which then gives you that freedom to go out and conduct your life.
And you have the Stiletto agency, and someone can hire you to speak or train or whatever it is. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're a coaching, consulting, and training company, and kind of the overarching deliverable is empowerment. So we do that empowerment through the training, like we've been talking about. All the little tips, tricks, tactics, knowledge to be safe, to go about your business confidently, so you can be in the moment. And then I also do coaching. personal performance coaching for that one-on-one type of training. So it could be in the, I've noticed Michele comes from the law enforcement, background, intelligence. Mine's more the corporate. But I would say in either one of those scenarios, you have to be comfortable in your environment. So, I needed to be comfortable in a business transaction when I was by myself conducting business. And there's lots of stories that, are the reason that led me to what I do today. But I also have to be confident around the board table. I have to be confident enough to fly and travel by myself. So I don't know where I was going with that, but that's the answer.
Well, I'm gonna help you out
I
too
forgot
with
the question, but that's the answer.
Yeah, there's Shelley's link to her book. You can get that on Amazon. It's in the comments. You can also go to Stiletto Agency. I'll put the link back up there for a second, and then we're going to talk to Michele about her stuff, because what she does is badass as well. So there's the Stiletto Agency link. You guys can just look in the comments. You should be able to find that. If you're on YouTube, it's being right there. Michele, same thing. How does one develop the confidence to not get trapped in their own house and afraid that the second, because look, if you watch the news, you'll think the world is a way worse place than it is. The reality is you go out into the world, gorgeous. The United States is beautiful. There's beautiful people everywhere. We're just talking about a microfraction of the time. How do you develop the confidence to deal with that?
I love what Shelley says. I'm just going to echo it. Is training and awareness. Like, I'm one of those people maybe that goes overboard a little bit. I'm always deconstructing events, like what went wrong and why did that happen, so that I can learn from it. What were the vulnerabilities that led to a terrorist attack, or what were that personal vulnerabilities? What were the red flags that woman picked up on before she was physically attacked? And so I try to do that, not to scare myself, but to say, geez, if I'm ever in that scenario, I'll know what to do. So I guess it's not isolating yourself. Isolation's never the answer. It is putting yourself out there in the world. And the more, like Shelley said, the more you travel, the more you learn how to react, the more you do that, your confidence grows.
And tell us about your course, Getting Off the X.
Oh, yeah. So I have a new course that's based off of chapter 8 in my book, Breaking Cover, which is called Get Off the X, which we've talked a little bit about today. But the idea is applying that security concept to life and to getting unstuck. Because I don't know about you, but like, I've had so many moments in my life, I'm like, I'm so stuck right now. I don't know how to get dislodged. I don't know how to take that next step. I don't know how to get to where I'm going. And so my Get Off the X seminar is a couple hour training that helps you identify what's got you on the X and help you plot your way off of it like a good intelligence officer. So I do a lot of keynotes, corporate keynotes, and now I'm expanding it to this whole seminar/training.
And then here is the link to Michele's book. I think I've not called Shelley Michele or Michele Shelley the entire show, which I'm pretty proud of, because that's easy to do when you're hosting things. You know what I always say to everybody? Buddy read. So buy one for yourself, buy one for your friend, and read them together. And then look, reach out to these ladies. They're definitely willing to engage with you and talk with you and invest some money. Look, even if it's not for you, invest it in your girlfriend, your wife, your kid, whatever it is. Invest and get the ladies' expertise for your person to help them be able to walk around, because Northern Virginia, on the train, in a mall, all these things, there's all kinds of people from all over the world. Thriller novels start in these kind of places. So it's great to have the experience of someone like Michele and Shelley on your side. So definitely go and support them. Anything in closing from either one of you?
Just to pull the thread that Michele was saying, I often will say, use headlines, use biographies of people who had, there was one that a mission, she was taken hostage for months, and learn, how did she survive? Like, use the resources, the stories, and like Michele said, take a headline, what worked for that situation, maybe what didn't work, and how can you kind of adjust that response. But just thinking about these things, and not letting all of this kind of go to the bottom of your list, keeping these things top of mind, and practicing them actively. And the best way to learn something is teach it. So sharing with your kids or your nieces and friends just keeps it in conversation. So when that moment comes, the moment of a crisis isn't the time to start thinking about what you should do. It should be this reaction. And we didn't get into OODA loops and all that, but it's really interesting. And I have found the more I learn, the more I want to know, because the more empowered I feel and the more confident I feel. And I like that feeling. So just start doing something. Buy Michele and Mi's book. Start there.
That's right. Let's definitely do that. Any closing thoughts at all, Michele?
Oh, no. So, look, just have, just, learn and grow, right? Like we're all just trying to get ahead. And, so it's just becoming more, more comfortable out in the world doing what you're called to do. Like you just don't want anything to like trip you up. We all have a mission in life. We've got to fulfill that purpose, and we can't let things like, personal security threats hold us back. And I see people do that all the time. And I think that's silly. Like, no, can't do that.
Yeah.
Empower yourself. Yeah.
I want to add one more thing to this. We didn't say this, but we have, at least in this country, from my experience, we have this default where we don't want to call 911. If you have a problem and you wish the constable was standing right there or a paramedic was standing right there and you would call out to them, hey, I need your help. This person's fallen over. Or, hey, constable, we're having a disagreement here. We don't, they'll come. They want to come. Not in Oakland. Forget about Oakland. But in most places, they will come and they will be like, yeah, no worries. It's all, you guys resolved it without our help. No harm, no foul. They're not going to get mad at you and say, oh, you shouldn't call us. If you feel like there's a problem, if you're having an argument, my brother and I got hit by a drunk driver. And while he talked to the drunk driver, I went over and I called the cops because it's not my job to sort out if this guy is drunk. It's not my job to prevent a fight if the cops are there. So we are all the first responders in truth. Yeah. You call the other people, they'll come in and they'll sort it out. And I promise they won't get mad. They're waiting for your phone call. They want to help out. They want to provide that safety and security. So don't hesitate to do that. Okay. Anything else for reals before I turn this thing off?
No, thanks for having us.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's been a
delight. Thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.